Alright, if you're new to this channel, obviously you know that I do multiple different subjects, whether it be fishing lures, collector cars, pretty much all the interest though is in personal hobby. And recently I had gotten this car from a friend of mine to compete in another event that was on YouTube. And since then I pulled out of the event with the cost of everything that's going up and the general group of individuals within that race. Since starting to build this car, it has gone through many modifications as far as changing different things. It originally started out as a short track, asphalt short track car that was raced for many years. Because of the chassis now, it does not fit the rules and regulations within that sanctioning body. Was in 2020 the introduction of the SRX racing series that has been put on by a couple of different NASCAR individuals. They have come out with an additional series to run cars very similar to this. The engine in that series is being allowed to run the LS engine plant, approximately making about 700 horsepower. For 2021, there were 6 televised races for the SRX series. Now, with this car being originally a short track, circle track race car, for this previous YouTube event, it was being changed over into a drag car. So some of the suspension was switched over to more of the left turn suspension handling, being converted over into straight line performance and drag racing. Now with the setup of this car and the introduction of the SRX racing type series, the different body panels, the hood design, the layout of the car is still going to be that circle track performance. With this car being a fiberglass body, it doesn't necessarily fall into the pure stock categories. But to get the most amount out of this race car as far as capabilities and different races that it could compete in, we're going with a stock style type engine that in order to qualify for different classes, you have to change very minimal components on the engine to qualify. So whether that be a 2-barrel restrictor type race, 4-barrel or 4-barrel restrictor type place, and then also cubic inch, allowing that cubic inch to be below most sanctioning body cubic inch limits. The chassis of this car is a 73 Dart with a fiberglass Dodge Avenger body on it. Full out roll cage. Rear suspension is still the factory leaf spring style suspension with a few upgrades to make it transfer over more into the not only straight line performance but going around corners. This car has been obviously borrowed to me for that event. I am going to be finishing this car, and the paint scheme is the same color as what is on the helmet. You guys can see I basically started with the base coat just to see how much I can duplicate the paint job from that I have on the helmet onto the race car. So it is a combination of the Mopar checkered black stripe, flat black stripe, with the carbon fiber variant on top, the yellow, bright yellow color shift. So this car is going to be capable of entering into multiple different racing bodies. Also with the SRX series, they will also be running short track dirt. So being able to take this car and with minor changes, take it from a drag strip to a roll course to a circle track to a dirt track, this chassis will be able to do them all with very minimal changes. So the route of this car is to build it and remain capable of changing things at a moment's notice. With the price of gas going up, to get into that pure all-out racing engine, is kind of outside of my budget range for most part. For most people, that's going to be a drastic thing. Racing gas going well over $12 a gallon. Okay, even E85 now going for well over $7 a gallon. Keeping the engine smaller in cubic inch will give more fuel economy even at higher RPMs, and keeping the compression low to allow it to run regular pump gas that you're going to be able to get still at this time for a affordable cost. With the SRX Racing Series, the Dirt Track Racing Series, and Drag Racing, the amount of time that the engine is running, how much fuel you're actually going to be used, is going to be minimized. Where you start getting into other classes that have 500 laps or very long duration racing, you can imagine how much fuel you're going to go through. So the idea behind this car is short little bursts, whether it be quarter mile racing, eighth mile racing, or 20 lap races. This is what I'm trying to build this car to mimic. Eventually this car will be given back to its original owner, finished, and at that point he is more of the driver where I'm more of the hands-on mechanical type guy. He's going to have the option to basically take this car and do whatever he wants with it. He is still involved with the circle track governing bodies that this car originally came from. They have swapped over to late model type chassis. So this is not able to compete in those series. But with multiple dirt tracks, circle tracks, and drag tracks within our region, and even road course, Road America is only about an hour and a half away from where I'm at now. My plan for this is to obviously set it up for drag racing and get that done. So the tires that are going on this are going to be much wider than the equipped stock car limited series tires. The tires that are going on this are going to be much wider, kind of like a pro street type car, to get as much grip as I possibly can for drag racing. But it's going to be built to the point where you can just change the offset of the rims and the width of the tire to where you can shrink down to that 10-inch wide restricted tire size. It is equipped with drum brakes on the back and disc brakes on the front, again keeping it in that stock type category. The fiberglass body, as you can see, is been banged up and chewed up and cracked and all stuff over the years. So I'm in the process right now of just finding out the color combinations that are going to work for this style chassis, and going through removing some of the circle track components and fixing this chassis. Another thing on the back of this car, in damages previously, it demolished the rear bumper of the car. This Dodge Avenger body is no longer available, so it's not like we can get replacement parts. So the SRX series race cars, they have a very flat back end with an exterior tubing bumper. So in order to fit in that type of category, I do not have to replace the entire rear bumper. I can just use sheet metal, straight sheet metal, and put the bumper to the outside. Along with the SRX, they also run a very high or large rear fin type design. So I do have fiberglass pieces that will be getting riveted on over the exterior of the original fiberglass body to mimic that SRX type chassis, but to the point where it can be taken off to run with any kind of rear fin that whatever racing series or style that we're trying to compete in will comply with their rules. So instead of taking one car and specifically making it for one purpose, this car is going to be a multifunctional car. And for me to get into a car and go around corners and get bumped around, I physically cannot do that because I have some back issues. For drag racing, that limited amount of burst of energy, I can do that. But the original owner of this car, the owner that this will be going back to, he's going to have all kinds of capabilities of entering it into any kind of sanctioning racing syndicate and have a car to compete. Whether or not it's the top car and everything, each individual race, probably not. But it's going to be to the point where you can get out there and you can actually do it. For individuals that are getting into this hobby, right now it's a very difficult time to do it because of part shortages, the cost of living, the prices are very high. But starting now and doing the components and the stuff that you can do is going to give you one step closer to, if things start to level off and start to get more affordable, you already have a chassis or maybe even an engine to start with, and you can get involved with that stuff for less than $10,000. It's hard to go out and buy a muscle car nowadays that you can drive on the street for under $10,000. So to be able to take a race car and compete in multiple different classes and do it safely and more legal, this is definitely a way to go. So for any of you that are new to this channel, you may have seen it on a previous channel, but the direction of this car has changed a little bit, but is still being completed, and it's a lot of fun. If you guys are interested in that need for speed at all, older stock cars, older race cars that already have roll cages and the chassis all welded up and stuff like that, it's a great starting point because you already have the safety features that are built into the roll cage, the flex of a roll cage car and a subframe connector car. And with the super stock style chassis like this, the weight is also adjustable, so there's multiple different things underneath the car to put the placement of weight in different locations. So if you have a weight limit or a limitation, you can adjust, remove, add, and put the weight wherever you want. Right now, for drag racing, all the weight is coming out of it. And for an engine that is completely cast iron, except for the intake, obviously, and the exhaust manifold or exhaust headers, this car is well under 2,000 pounds. So without having to get into that high compression, extremely high horsepower engine, this is something that's going to go fast because it's not very heavy. So the biggest challenge out of building a car like this is basically setting up the rear suspension to be able to get as much grip as possible because of the light weight. There's not going to be a whole lot of weight to transfer to plant the rear tires. But once that is said and done, going back to a different class, it is nothing but changing. Let's see if I have one out here. This whole part of the car is basically a channel, a 5-inch by 5-inch square tubing, and there's multiple different brackets right behind here to add lead weight to it to get this weight of this car to whatever specifications it needs to be and location. So you can also take it from the left side of the car to the centralized part of the car. The engine and transmission, everything is offset back in the car to get the weight more stable between all 4 tires. And then it's also adjustable for height and the rake, so you can set it up for drag racing, lifting it up and moving it back to plant more of the weight to the back tires. So just if you guys are interested in this, this is where we're at right now. In a few weeks here, we're going to be going to a local car show here in Wisconsin called the Iola Car Show. It is one of the largest car shows within the Great Lakes region. Thousands of vendors and tens of thousands of cars usually show up. It will take you at least 2 to 3 days of just walking the aisles without actually having to stop and look for the parts that you want. So I'm going to be going, I believe it's the July 6th, 7th, and 8th this year. It starts on a Wednesday and it goes through Saturday. Usually Wednesday it's not a good day to go because some of the vendors don't have everything set up yet or they're just arriving. So Thursday morning right away is like the key ticket. Get in there if you're looking for parts that are scarce. you can get in there and cover as much ground as you possibly can to find stuff. Friday is more of your individuals that might have a long weekend that are coming in to look at the actual cars themselves and not the parts. So Saturday again also is usually just for the vacationers or people that are interested in cars but aren't looking for anything specific. So at that car show, we're going to be looking for a set of rims that are going to be drag racing style and also can be transferred over into that Trans Am left and right turn style racing. So they're going to be a little bit wider for the back to get more traction. And then also there's a few other odds and ends that we have to pick up just to get the car back up to the snuff. I need a new window net, and some seat belts for this car because they're so old they actually started to dry rot and they're not within spec anymore. So I'm going to be trying to pick some of that stuff at the car show, along with a set of rims and possibly some tires for the drag racing aspect. And then we have enough on hand as far as other rims and tires that we can swap out and change over to other different categories. My personal plan with the car, like I said, is drag racing and possibly a stint at Road America in their nostalgia race car type series. Again, that's limited. It's not a very competitive event. It is more for guys that just want to get their car on the track and use it for the purpose that they were built for. You're not necessarily going to be concentrating on smashing in and getting to the car next to you or getting past it to really push it. Almost all the cars out there are collectors of some kind or restored antiques that don't necessarily want to get banging and booming and through the tires and don't really care about coming in first place for points or money payout. It is just to get the cars out and get the dust off of them. So I'd like to run this the spring of 2023 at Road America if possible. So after this racing event, drag racing event, it'll be converted over to that, and then possibly even a different engine combination. Right now, the engine that is going to it, like I said, is a 318 base Chrysler LA series engine with multiple modifications for the super stock type restrictions. It is running a small CFM carburetor. It is a 4-barrel, but it's only 525 CFM, so that we're in a ballpark. If we have to go back to the 500 CFM 2-barrel intake system, we don't have to change a whole lot on the car to get it in that same performance level. The tubular headers are chauffeured. 180-degree headers go all to the right side of the car. And it also has a NASCAR style boom style exhaust system on it. So we're legal within stationing bodies. That's the style of exhaust that's going to be on it. There is a secondary exhaust system that we have built for this car in case we need to run it under different restrictions. So within a matter of an hour, we can change this car from one style of racing to another, and then back again, or completely to a different style. The fiberglass right now that I have for adding the wing on here is recycled fiberglass from a 18-wheeler semi-foil that goes over the cab of the trucks. It is also the part that I needed for the hood. Stock car racing normally just has a flat sheet metal hood. With the SRX series racing, they have a different rule book as far as what the hood style goes. They're allowed to have a bulge in the hood to clear the air filter and intake system, and they also are allowed to have louvers in the system to get heat out. With this style, we're actually going with the Carroll Shelby Series 1 style hood, where the radiator and everything is underneath the nose cone, but the hood actually comes down right behind the radiator, so the hot air that's going through the radiator is not going into the engine compartment. It also helps evacuate that hot air from the radiator and from the front of the car without disturbing the aerodynamics of the car. It also allows the hood to be a front pivot, so you can open the hood from the back to the front instead of being front and up. That allows more room to work on the engine in between races, or if you have to pull an engine out, you can basically just pull a couple pins, the hood comes off, and everything's out of the way. With the engine being recessed back, you need to have that area cleared to be able to get your engine picker out of there and get the engine out. For the drag racing, we initially went with the lightest transmission that we could possibly find. So the A203 Chrysler 3-speed, the synchro mesh variation is what we're running. Depending on how it actually does with the drag racing, it might also be the same transmission that we use in other classes. It was already run in a Circle Track series on this car previously, so everything, all the bolt ups and hangers and everything like that, all line up already for this transmission. With Circle Track racing, normally fourth gear is the only gear that you use. So for drag racing, you're limited to having first, second, and third. With the high gear ratios and the gear options that we have with the 8 3/4 inch Chrysler center section, we can change them out fairly quickly, and we can customize the gear shifts to the distance that we're driving or the speeds that we need to maintain. Those will all be able to be met with the A203. The A203 is also the transmission that the Chrysler used behind the 383 big block Chrysler of the muscle car era, the late 60s, early 70s. So as far as being capable of handling that 450 to 500 horsepower, it is capable of doing that. Anything above that, if we were to go to more of the dedicated SRX series, 700 horsepower LS, the transmission obviously is not going to bolt up to the same motor, and it's not going to be able to handle that power. So we're going to, right now, the GM 600 series crate motors are also used in the stock car series, short track series, along with the SRX series. So with the owner of this car actually in the Circle Track racing, he does run the GM 602 crate motor, so he's very familiar with the performance level of those. And so in order to swap this over to an LS, he has the knowledge and know-how to do that. So just an update with this channel. Obviously, it's not, my other channel has been shut down, that was specifically into the racing. This one is going to be about all kinds of different topics and things that I'm just working on now. It's getting to be, the last few weeks, it's been over 100 degrees here. The hornets are trying to build nests on the inside of the car. So right now, in order to do the paint job or any of the fiberglass fixing, that dust gets around and really starts to stick to your sweaty arms and stuff like that. So I'm limited to about 2 hours a day in the evening when it is cooled down, once this is in the shade, before I can actually start working on this. But the intent is to finish this car completely, have it running by the end of July, have the month of August to kind of work out the bugs, and then actually take this to a couple different drag strips in the month of September, which would include Rock Falls Dragway in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and also the Wisconsin International Raceway in Kaukauna, Wisconsin, with the quarter-mile drag races. Initially, this car was being set up for the 8th mile drag race. So the only difference is basically what gear ratio we're going to be running in the back end, and we're going to have to be able to determine that later on, once the car is running and rolling, to see what kind of performance we're getting, and how much power we're actually being able to get to the rear tires. So with that, again, just an introduction to this car. I won't get into details as far as building the engines or details into why I am setting this car up with different features, for the simple fact that all comes from years of knowledge and experience that I don't necessarily want to share with everybody else. So as long as you want to come along and see, how this advances and some of the different features that will be able to share to you, and get your interest sparked into building a car similar to this, you're welcome to come along for the ride. So with that, I'm going to let you guys go. And it's nice and cool out today, so I'm actually able to work on it. So I'm going to be finishing off the back end and figuring out how to put on the rear foil onto this car, and fixing up some of the bangs and dents and stuff like that on the car. So I'll catch you guys later.